Hello there, Thando Book Club lovers. We are so happy to have you join us as we talk to African female authors about their books and the stories behind them. As is our custom, we always begin every episode with a quote from a famous African that we believe captures the spirit and message of the author we'll be interviewing. Today's quote is an African proverb that states, "It is not because things are hard that we do not dare. It is because we do not dare that things are hard." This quote sums up what our guest today champions in her work and in her book, Perfect Imperfections. Meet Makanaka Mavengere. She is an author, playwright, and screenwriter who has an accounting degree and was born and raised in Harare, Zimbabwe, but currently resides in Johannesburg. Her debut novel, Perfect Imperfections, was published in August 2019 by Blackbird Books in South Africa. She wrote a play, Maid in the Mirror, which was produced and stage-read at the Almasi Collaborative Conference in Harare, Zimbabwe in January 2020, and she is currently working as a freelance scriptwriter. Makanaka, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Selena. I'm so excited to be here, and yeah, we're here now.
Well, you're definitely one of our book club faves, one of our initial first guests when we were on live stream, and you just look gorgeous today.
Thank you so much.
The colors are so beautiful on you.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay, so there is something I have to ask you.
Okay.
As we're doing this for TV, and I think you know what it's about. When you were promoting Perfect Imperfections, you had this little social media reel called The Book Heist.
Yes.
What was that about?
Okay, so I think I wanted to ride on the money heist sensation that was going around, and I thought, you know what, what's the best way of trying to showcase my book as well as other African authors that I've read about. So I did the whole thing, and then when I dropped the books, I wanted to show the titles as well, mine included, and there were a lot of great titles that I felt, and a lot of people were asking me, so where did I get these titles? And I was like, there's so many African writers that are out there, and we're busy going on about the money heist. People need money, but books are the thing, because you're going to experience a lot of things. You're going to travel, you're going to walk into other people's shoes. So that was the whole point of it, and I had a lot of fun doing it.
You looked like you were having fun, and it was so funny, and it was so cool.
Thank you so much.
So tell us now, in terms of your writing journey, why did you start writing?
For a very long time, I think with me, the writing of the book, I had spoken about it when I was 16, believe it or not. So when I was 16, I think I was lying on my bed in boarding school, and I told some girl that I'm going to write a book, and I'd even forgotten about it. So when I turned 30, this girl wrote to me 20 years later, and she's like, Makanaka, what happened to the book? And then that's when I was like, you know what? And there was a heaviness that I had. I couldn't understand, and I had a lot of voices in my head. So I would like, if I'm sitting with people, if someone says something, it will be like a story that goes on, and I didn't know how to release it. So when she wrote to me, I was like, you know what? Actually, let me write a book. So when I wrote the book, it was such a release. Like, people don't understand, it was such a release. I had it, and I was carrying this burden of this book, and when I wrote it, it was like, this is what I needed to do all along. Yeah, so that is exactly why I wrote the book, and I wanted to tell stories, and I think for me, it was more of telling stories by women, for women, about women as well. So that's why I wrote the book.
That's wonderful. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And it kind of aligns with the publisher that then published the book, because Blackbird Books is really doing great things for African female writers.
Yes.
From South Africa and in the region. So what did your writing process look like? Because you wanted to do it when you were 16. We've got this 14-year period where you did great things, accounting, children, all of the stuff, and then you have the moment, the seizure for the book.
Yeah.
What was the process like?
It was very hard, I won't lie. So it was very confusing as well, because I didn't know what to do with the voices, because it was a lot. So I had a lot of little papers behind receipts. I was writing. I started recording on my phone, because sometimes when I'm driving, something can just make me have all these thoughts. So I would start recording, and then at some point I had to sit down and put everything together. And then as I'm trying to do that, I had to put a specific voice to whatever it is that I had written. It was a lot. So it was very confusing for me, but after some time when I figured out who the characters were going to be, what they were going to be experiencing, then all the stuff that I had then matched with the specific characters. So it was a bit confusing, it was a bit long, but I think I really did enjoy it. I really did enjoy it. I don't know if I'll do it the same way now when I write my next book, but yeah, it'll be easier now because I think I've got my brain in the right place now. Yeah.
That's so cool. You started like basically from the middle,
Yes.
and found your way around.
Yes,
So
I
just
did.
quickly before we go to break, since the book has been released, what has been pleasantly surprising about the response?
I think people responded the way that I wanted them to respond. People related to the book, people related to the characters, and everyone was like, oh my gosh, some people cried, and I cried as well when I was writing. So I think I really like that. The one thing that I think I've had a couple of people ask me, why did you let her stay for 14 years or 12 years? And I'm just like, it is what it is. She was young, so she had to grow up to get to that point, to experience, to get to that point. So overall, I was really happy with the reaction. That's exactly what I wanted, and yeah, very fulfilling.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, if people can relate and people have all of these feelings about the book, you definitely know that they connected and they actually read the book.
Yes.
I would think that the most scariest response for me would be like, oh, it was okay. And nobody like giving you any detail about like what was in the book. So I think that that's amazing.
Yeah.
And definitely the story you tell in the book is engaging. I always remember the opening of the book and the vividness of what this girl is going through, and you're like, where are we going with this? If it's this, if it's like this, what is going to happen next?
My gosh,
So yeah, it was very the suspense and the tension was incredible in the book. So I'm looking forward to discussing that in the next segment.
Okay, I'm also looking forward to it.
Well, we'll be taking a short break and we'll be back in a few minutes to discuss the book Perfect Imperfections, themes, the protagonist, and the world building. You don't want to miss this. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We're in the studio with Makanaka Mavengere discussing her book Perfect Imperfections, and in this segment we'll be talking about themes in the book, the character's journey, and so much more. So, Makanaka, this book is very interesting to me. When I read it, I was like, oh, this is such a nice departure from what we're so used to in terms of stories about Zimbabwe, stories about Africans, you know, and it's a migrant story to a certain extent, but it's a very Zimbabwean story.
Yes.
So there are many characters in this book. And how did you come up with those characters?
Okay, so for me, it was I think the main character, it was actually based on someone who had worked for me. So I found the way that she used to tell me, you know what happened in the other house? So for me, I was like, oh my gosh, because I didn't want my characters to be friends, because I think we've had a lot of that. So I didn't want, but I didn't know how to bring these women together. So when that lady told me that, I was like, you know what, so these people, that's what they do. So that's how I came up with Maxine, because based on that actual lady. The other characters, it was different. I put, so I'll get a characteristic from you, a characteristic from myself to put them together. But then the stories were real stories that I was hearing over and over and over again. I was like, you know what, women are actually facing a lot of these things. It's only that no one is talking about it in that depth, because all the time we want to present this perfect front, and then no one wants to reveal their imperfections. So that's why I wrote it, and that's how I developed the characters based on my book club friends. So some of them, when I'm describing them, my book club friends are like, you were talking about me. So even names, I used names of my sisters, their other names. Not that the character is actually based on them, but I think I struggled to find names as well. So it was based on a lot of, it's very few things in the book or in the characters are fictional. Most of them, it's stories that I heard on the bus, on the train, wherever it is. But so all the characters based on real people.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I love that it's real but fictionalized, because I think that realness is what makes that fiction story so authentic.
Yeah.
I also love the fact that Maxine, being the maid, is the tie that threads all of these different women's stories together.
Yes.
And because the book starts out in a different period or season of her life, you almost think this is going to go one way, this is going to be very heavy, this is going to be very painful to read. But then you take us on another journey, which is really quite nice. And so I really must commend you, because I feel like you had to be very self-aware to be able to deal with other people's lives, but also bring yourself in a story that was fair to everybody involved. And I do think you were fair to the characters. In revealing their imperfections, you did it with such compassion and such grace, and still gave dignity to them and dignity to Maxine. Although I must say, Maxine made me look at my maid differently.
I know you're not the only person, because even when I did the play, everyone was like, nah, I don't know if I can trust my maid. No, I don't know if I can be telling them all these things, because yes, definitely. I'm sorry to say that, but definitely a lot of maids, a lot of people who read the book have said that about their maids. I'm like, but that's the truth of it.
But it's very important as well, because I think people need to realize that everybody's the protagonist in their own story.
Yes.
So that's the other thing that I really appreciated about this book. Everybody is brought to the story like they are the center of that story. And then we begin to see that actually nobody's a victim in life.
Yes.
We're all part and parcel of the outcomes. Everything we have is a result of the choices and actions we're making.
Yes.
So how did you do that faithfully? Because I would have been intimidated. Maxine is the protagonist, but then, you know, we've got all of these madams, the 4 madams.
Yes.
And every time we are talking to them, every time they're on screen, they're like the heroines of their story. How did you do that?
Yeah. Okay, so how I did it was I had the madams first before I had Maxine. So I had the stories of each madam, and I wrote them from start to finish. So I would write Monde's story, I would write Tendekai, I would write Kreshi, I would write Nyarai from start to finish. And then when I put in Maxine in the mix, then I had to then weave her in. And then as I weave her in, I have to now kind of like make sure that it's flowing. It's a natural flow. As this story is moving, as this story is moving, and as she's talking to Kreshi when she's describing the 4 madams, it also had to flow. So I think that is the part that took me the longest, because the weaving of it. But I wrote from start to finish each character so that I know, I take everything from within me about that character. I finish, then I start with another one and not mix the emotions. So that's how I did it.
Well, that's a wonderful way to observe people, because I don't think that we're even that intentional and even that fair to other people when we consider their impact in our lives, that this person is a fully formed human being with their own motivations and background, and they're coming to my story from their story. They're not just a supporting actor in my story. So I really love that, and I think it was very brave and courageous for you to do that. But I also think that you did that really, really well.
Thank you.
So well done to you for that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
So this must have given you great fodder for when you translated it to theatre.
Into a play, yes.
Yeah. So what was that like?
The play, translating into a play, I found it to be more interesting because I could see the characters now. Because I think I didn't have faces, but when I could see the characters in real life, I was like, oh my gosh, these people, they actually did. Because the lady who played Kreshi, she also played Tendekai. They're 2 different people. But it was, and then I had to make it into a play. So some of the stuff that's in the book had to go, and I had to add some more stuff to make it into a play. But it was such an interesting experience. It was amazing, even the response that I got, because people were just like, where is the book? We want to read the book, because of how the characters showed the story, how they, it was, you have no idea. It was amazing. It was amazing.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Thank you that for also giving us that tidbit that the play was a lead generator for book sales.
Yes.
So that's a good tip there.
Definitely.
Well, powerful insights there for us all to ponder. But it's time for us to take a short break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with advice from Makanaka about the writing and publishing process in a few moments. You don't want to miss this. You're watching the Thando Book Club, and we're interviewing Makanaka Mavengere about her book, Perfect Imperfections. You're just in time to get some good advice on writing and the publishing process, and so we just can't wait to get back into this conversation. Makanaka, what did you learn from the process of publishing your book, specifically because your book was trade published?
It was hard. And you have to accept no's. So I think it made me very hard, I think, and accepting, because it was no, 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 and I kept knocking, and my persistency was tested, and I nearly gave up. But at the point when I thought I was going to give up, that's when Blackbird Books came through. But it was really hard. It's not easy. It's not easy to sell an African story to people out there. They don't get it. And for me, I didn't want to have Maxine move to the States. I wanted it to still be here. So I think that was the point where a lot of people are like, you know what, if it's from Zim, we don't get it. So, but it was hard. But once I passed that hurdle, once I got the yes, and it was the only yes that I got. Once I got that, going into editing, had to lose some characters. So that part, well, I was like, you know what's the worst that can happen? I'm going now. And editing was a lot because there were some things that I had to lose, a character I had to lose that I was like, but then I was like, you know what, I'm going to write another book. That character is going to make a comeback. So it was hard, but in the end, very fulfilling because Blackbird Books, they really put me out there. Maybe not so much in Zimbabwe, but in South Africa, they really did. And I went for book shows, anything. I was really there, and they got to understand the Zimbabwean story, which is what I really wanted.
Definitely. It's truly a Zimbabwean story.
Yeah.
But I think what was quite clever and what would have been appealing to a South African publisher is that there was the journey into a South African context, which many people would have been able to relate to within the readership there. I think that's just so true to the way that we're living today. Like, we've got Zimbabweans in many different parts of the world, but we've got South Africans also in many different parts of the world. So we're all migrants to a certain extent, and like those borders are collapsing more and more because, you know, of all of the entertainment that we consume. So with all of that happened in terms of trade publishing, what advice would you give to budding writers?
I would suggest that first of all they read, and once you read, don't think that you've got it, because sometimes you write from a point of like a personal experience. So you're writing from a point of emotion. So let other people read it to soften it, because I write and I'm like hard and I'm going. But then when you let other people read and take advice, don't be like, no, because this is my story. You fight for the story, but then there's some things that you have to let go. So I'd advise people to read. I'd advise people to let other people read before they can submit it for consideration to publishers, and take criticism. There is no criticism that is not good. As hard as it may be to take criticism, I think sometimes you have to take a step back and say, you know what, 3 people cannot be saying the same thing. Maybe I need to relook at this. So that's what I would encourage. And don't worry, if people say no, someone is bound to say yes. Just keep pushing.
I love that. Take just criticism, because there's no criticism that isn't good, that doesn't work. That is constructive, and it's a hit to the ego. But once you actually take on board what is happening, and you take it on board from a perspective of, well, we all want the same goal, which is that we want the book to be readable. And if it's readable, more people will read it, and the story will go further. You know, I think you can go through that. So that's a lot for me to ponder on that you've given me there. So usually at this point in the interview, we take a little time out to do a reading from the book. So we ask the author to prepare a reading that they believe women need to hear right now. So what have you prepared for us?
It's the very first chapter, I think, because that's where her journey started. And I want people to just, when I read it, I think people will understand, because that's where she made the decision. Because I think you go through life, but it's at a point where you make a decision that you start experiencing change. And that is the part that I want to read, where she makes the decision to say, if I don't do this, then, you know, nothing is going to happen. I have to be my own hero. I have to be my own help. So that is the part that I think women need to hear. We are our own heroes. We are our own help. No one is going to be there waiting to save you. Like the fairy tales, those are fairy tales. But in real life, you have to be your own hero. You have to be your own help to go after what it is that you want.
Awesome. Lovely. So please share with us your reading.
Okay. Chapter 1, 17 January 2018. I lay on my thin mattress the night before my first day at work and thought about the events that had led me to where I was now. I remembered so vividly the moment when my head was being bashed against the concrete floor while my children, Maid, Tadiwa, and my junior, watched helplessly. I remembered seeing snippets of what my life was flashing across my face. I remembered how at that very moment I realized the vanity of my screams because there was no one to help me but myself. It was the awakening to that fact that I had to be my own help, my own hero, that made me know I was not ready to die. I couldn't, not in that way. I begged God to spare my life, to give me another chance, and as I prayed, I clung to every shred of faith that was in me, hoping it was sufficient to save me from the prospect of prematurely meeting the Creator himself that very night. I bargained with God. I vowed that should I survive, I would not only stop living my life under terms and conditions mapped and imposed on me generations before I was born, but I would also serve him all the days of my life. I laughed to myself quietly, thinking of how far I had come. I did not know a lot of things, but the one thing I knew for sure at that moment was that I had had enough and had to leave. I had to leave not only because my husband was beating me and had done so countless times, but because I realized it was never going to stop and he was going to beat me for the rest of my life if I stayed. Looking ahead at that prospect, I was convinced running away was my one and only option. A noise from outside shook me out of my thoughts. I raised my head so I could listen properly but heard nothing, so I put my head back on my pillow. I wondered how Signor reacted when he discovered I had wiped him clean of all the money he had under the mattress, and shuddered just thinking about the punishment the other wives must have faced because of my actions. I wondered what my parents were thinking and how I was probably spoken of as a disgrace in the village, labeled the foolish girl who left her marital home and children. I needed to raise enough money to go back to school. I needed to raise money to help my parents, and I needed money to pay Signoro back so I could regain my freedom.
Wonderful. Absolutely amazing.
Thank you, thank you.
Well, it's been another great edition of the Book Club with our guest, Makanaka Mavengere. See you again next week, same time, with another fabulous African female author. Until then, stay true, stay safe, and see you next week.